It was my first Halloween on Hambry Street, and I was raring to go. I had just moved to the neighborhood the week before, and I was hoping to meet some of the kids on the street as I filled my bag with treats. Mom hadn't set out to move this close to Halloween, but when your dad decides he needs his house for his mistress and her kids, you have to pick up and go pretty quickly. The court had made him buy Mom out of her half of the house, but that wasn't too difficult for him. We'd found a very nice house on Hambry Street, a street packed with families and little crackerbox houses, but unpacking hadn't left a lot of time to make friends. Now, standing on the front stoop in my homemade ghost costume, I was ready to find some friends. The costume had been last minute. My mom had honestly forgotten about it in the move, and when I had reminded her an hour ago, she had realized that there was no time to buy one. Hunting around, she found some old sheets and cut a couple of eye holes in one to make a classic ghost costume. It looked kinda lame next to the superheroes and cartoon characters that were tromping up and down the street, but I liked it. It reminded me of Charlie Brown from the storybook I had on my bookcase, and as I set out, I wondered if someone might actually give me a rock. I didn't get a rock, but I did get a lot of looks from those around me. I had expected some laughs, maybe some questions about why I didn't have a real costume, but what I got was something between fear and scorn. People stepped out of my way. The adults looked down at me with disbelief, and a lot of the kids looked scared. I had to look at the front of the sheet a couple of times to make sure they weren't stained or something. No one wanted to talk to me. Most of the kids turned away from me, and the people at the houses refused to give me candy. They slammed the door in my face almost immediately, some of them telling me that I should be ashamed of myself before doing it. That's how I came to be sitting on the sidewalk, trying not to cry, and wondering why I had bothered to come out at all. I'd met no one, I had made 0 friends, and I felt like I should have just gone home an hour ago. So when the group of other kids in ghost costumes walked down the street, they were pretty easy to spot. There were 5 of them, their ghost costumes looking dirty and ragged, and as they walked like a line of spooky ducklings, the crowd parted for them as well. They didn't stop at any of the houses, they didn't speak to anyone, they just kept making their way up the street like an arrow fired from a bow. I felt drawn to follow them for some reason, and to this day I can't say why. Maybe I felt some kind of kinship, maybe it was the way people treated them, but regardless, I got up and ran to catch them, my shoes slapping on the concrete as I went. The other kids watched me go with genuine concern, but I didn't much care. These kids seemed to have made the same mistake I had, and it seemed like it was better to be an outcast as a group than alone. "Hey, wait up!" I called, the 5 ghosts utterly ignoring me as they went along. We walked in our now 6-ghost line, and I began attempting to make conversation with them. They looked to be about my age, or at least my height, and they all carried brightly colored candy bags that were in the same sorry state as their costumes. They were mud-spattered, ripped in places, and the kid in front had shoes with the soles nearly coming off. His left sole slapped on the pavement, going whap, 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 and I wondered what sort of costumes these were. Were they some kind of zombie ghosts or something? Next to my clean white sheet, they looked downright grimy, and I wondered why their parents had let them leave the house like this. "Where are we going?" I finally asked, all of them leaving my neighborhood as we turned a corner and headed into a less crowded street. I promised my mom I wouldn't go too far, and I don't know the streets real well. They ignored me, but I wouldn't have long to wonder. I had seen the house before. Mom and I stared at it as we'd driven into town. It stood out, the grass long, the fence ragged, but the house was the centerpiece of the unkempt space. It had probably once been a very nice one-story house, but it looked like someone had pelted it with eggs or dirt, or both, and the owner just hadn't bothered to clean it off. The windows were boarded up, the shingles hung raggedly from the roof, and someone had spray-painted "Killer" across the garage door in big red letters. It was impossible not to notice, and I realized too late that this was our destination. Are we trick-or-treating here? I don't even think anyone lives here. They didn't say anything, but I realized I was wrong a few minutes later. I could see a light peeking from a crack in one of the boarded-up windows, and as the ghosts arrived on the sidewalk, it was suddenly covered by a shadow. The ghosts did not approach the house. They didn't even come off the sidewalk. They just stood there, bags in hand, and stared at the house. The shadow moved away from the opening a few times, but it always came back in short order. It was a fitful thing, moving away only to come back quicker and quicker to check that the ghosts were still there. I kept turning to look at them, asking what we were doing, and receiving no answer. The ghost kids just stood and stared, boring into the house with their dark circle eyes, and I think that was when I really got a good look at them. Their sheets weren't just grimy, they were covered in mud tracks. Some of the stains looked like they could be blood, but the worst was the bare stretch of leg beneath the sheets. The skin on those legs was cut and bleeding, purple and bruised, and the arms were in a similar state of abuse. The eyes, though, the eyes were the worst. Looking out from the open holes were dark eyes that were purple with rings. The kids looked like they had gone 10 rounds with a professional boxer, and the part that usually had color was pitch black and unblinking. These kids weren't interested in candy. They were out for something else. I had opened my mouth to ask them why we were just standing here, when the door suddenly opened, and a man in dirty, sweat-stained clothes came weaving out. He wore sweatpants and a tank top, and his bare feet looked like he had bumped them enough times to break every toe on them. He was thin to the point of being skeletal, and the clothes hung off him like rags. I had worried at first that he might be drunk, weaving and pivoting across the yard, but the closer he got, the more I understood that he was stone sober. He wasn't stumbling. He was afraid, and it took everything he had to approach the ghost kids. "What do you want?" he stammered, his foot catching on something in the tall grass. "Why do you torment me?" The grass was so tall that you could hear the dry husks scraping against his pants. But if it bothered him, or the 5 other little ghosts, it never showed. "Haven't I suffered enough? The town won't let me forget. My ex-wife won't let me forget. And now you return every Halloween to remind me of my mistake. Why? Why? Just leave me alone. Haven't I suffered enough?" He stumbled again, his foot catching hard this time, and when he bumped into me, he barely missed knocking me down. That's when he seemed to realize that I was something else. He looked at me in disbelief, but it quickly turned to rage. He lunged forward, grabbing me and shaking me as I tried to articulate something, anything, that would make him stop. He was hurting me, my head snapping back and forth as he shook, and I couldn't make a sound as he tried to shake me to death. You aren't one of them. There were only 5 of them. There's always been 5 of them. Why are you here? Why are you tormenting me? Why are you... Something hit him in the face, and he fell back into the grass and clutched his cheek. Something wet and sticky rolled down his neck, and I had a moment of fear as I wondered if it might be his eye. It wasn't. I saw that when he pulled his hand away. But when the second one hit him, I saw it was an egg, as a third and a fourth joined it. Get off him, you killer! Haven't you killed enough kids already? I turned to see 3 kids on the opposite sidewalk, a carton of eggs between their feet, and their hands already throwing more. The man scuttled backwards, shielding his face as he went and disappeared into the grass, more eggs pelting in on him. I heard the crunch of old weeds that was followed by the slam of a door, and when I heard sneakers coming up towards me, I put a hand up in case the eggs came flying my way. You okay, kid? I looked up to find a Power Ranger, the red one, extending a hand to help me up. That was Ryan, someone who would later become my best friend over the next few days. Yeah, I said, accepting the hand up. I looked over at where the other ghosts had been, but they were all gone. I suppose they had gotten what they came for. Whoa, let me help you with that, he said, taking the sheet off and folding it a little as he draped it around me. After a few minutes of fussing with it, his friends coming over to help, he had made a halfway decent toga out of it. His friends, soon to be my friends too, Rob and Patrick, agreed that it looked a lot better, though it clashed with their Power Ranger costumes badly. You're that kid that just moved in on Hamby, right? Ryan asked. I'm Ryan. This is Patrick and Robert. Just Rob, he insisted as he waved. They invited me to come with them, chucking another dozen or so eggs at the house that the man had scuttled back into. They didn't seem angry about it. They did it like it was an expected chore, and almost seemed bored. They left the trash in the yard before picking up their bikes and walking back the way I'd come, towards the happy sound of our active street. Why did you guys throw eggs at that house anyway? I asked, the 4 of us passing more kids on their way with eggs. Did he do something to you? I had expected them to laugh or maybe act proud of what they had done, but they just shrugged. It was a look you sometimes saw on people who were voting or going about volunteer work, bored but certain of their actions, and it was something that was hard to make sense of at the age of 10. We egg his house every year. Everybody does. No one likes Horace Jenkins, but especially not on Halloween. Why? I asked, still confused. Same reason I bet no one has given you candy. No one wears ghost costumes either. Not after what he did. But what did he do? I said, starting to get aggravated. Ryan turned like he was going to yell at me for being stupid, but seemed to remember that I was new. It was probably about 15 years ago, way before we were born. Horace Jenkins was the owner of some company, something that was doing well around here, but it didn't make people like him. Horace Jenkins, from what my dad says, was a mean man. He didn't treat people right. He was rude. He didn't support the community. But he was rich, so people let him stay. On Halloween night, about 15 years ago, he was coming home drunk from some party he'd been at with his rich friends, and he ran over 5 kids in ghost costumes. It was all over the news. People knew he did it, but he got some hotshot lawyer who got him out of jail time. They claimed the kids had been running across the road. They claimed Horace hadn't actually been drunk, and they cast a lot of doubt and made a lot of deals. At least that's what Dad said. Afterwards, Horace tried to pay the families off, but they wouldn't take his money. No one in town would take his money. No one would work for his company. And he lost all his money when his wife left him. She took the house, his cars, his kids, and he was left with that little house and not much else. The people here let him live in that house, but they let him know that we haven't forgotten. After the incident, it was considered kind of disrespectful to wear ghost costumes anymore. That's why no one does it. They didn't know you were the new kid on the block. They just thought you were being mean. Now you know better. Eh, Caesar? Caesar became my nickname after that, and my makeshift toga got me a lot of candy before the streetlights went out. I spent some time afterward trading candy with my new friends and promising to see them at school the next day. I still live in that town, some 20 years later, and it's still considered a tradition to go egg Horace Jenkins' house. He's still alive, an old codger of 79, and I've realized that the town keeps him around as a warning. Working for the bank, I've come to find out that Horace Jenkins has no money, no assets, not a penny to his name, but his taxes are paid, his power and water bills paid, and food is left on his doorstep once a week to sustain him. It's nothing gourmet, the basics are good enough for him, but it keeps him alive and living in a house that is slowly rotting around him. Once a year, someone cuts the grass. Once a year, someone spray paints killer on his garage door. Once a year, we all throw eggs and dirt clods at his house to remind him that he tried to cheat his way out of 5 lives. The law may have exonerated him, but the town does not forget, and it doesn't forgive. Sometimes, while my friends and I throw our eggs at the sagging wreck, I think I see 5 little ghosts on the sidewalk, staring at the house of the man who murdered them. Sometimes, while I throw my eggs at that temple of hatred, I wish Horace Jenkins would live 1,000 years. Then I remember those ghost kids will be waiting for him, and that brings me some comfort. You're still here. Thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague here. Always a pleasure to see all my new and old viewers coming by for another one of my spooky tales. If you'd like to support the show, you can always take part in one of our channel offers through Fume or Aura, or you can just click on another video when they come up. I'd really appreciate it. For our newer viewers, we also have lots of playlists and other things if you'd like to get caught up. I know some of my series have been going on for quite a while. If you'd like to get my latest book, there's a link down below that'll take you to my Amazon page. Towesey Homestead just came out, so if that's something you'd like to get your hands on, go ahead and have a look down there. If you'd like a signed copy, you can go ahead and email me from my email address on the site, and I'll get with you about shipping information and ship you a signed copy. If you'd like to support the channel in a more monetary fashion, we also have membership through YouTube, and we've got a Patreon that you can get the information for in the description. We have lots of tiers and everything to suit your needs. Patrons that support on the $10 tier, that's our Ghostly Reader tier, get a book anytime I write one, signed and on their doorstep. As you may have noticed, there's a list of patrons and members on the screen, and I'd like to personally thank every one of them for taking a hand in the future of this channel. Well, that's enough for tonight. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.